Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore how technology is transforming our life, our work, industries, and indeed our world. But before I begin, as it looks like we're going to be 3 months without a hairdresser here in the UK, I thought I would take matters into my own hands and tidy things up with a pair of clippers. How hard can it be, right? Well, let me share with you, I ended up messing it up completely, and the only way to rectify my mistake was having a grade 2 all over. Luckily for me, I do hide behind a microphone for a living and have a great face for radio, so as I've got nowhere to go, it isn't too bad. But I do scare myself whenever I walk past a mirror and catch a glimpse of myself, but hey, it will grow back. And enough of my haircut adventures. Today, I want to explore the world of agriculture and technology, and it's even got its own buzzword there, ag-tech. But I wanted to learn more about how it's embarking on a digital and tech transformation right now. Because despite holding up remarkably well during the pandemic, the early disruption to the supply chain served as somewhat of a wake-up call to the agriculture sector. Consequently, an industry that has typically been 5 to 10 years behind the technology curve, it's finally coming to recognise the potential of AI as a catalyst for arguably much needed change. And a recent survey by Proagrica recently revealed that it found that AI has risen up the agenda in agriculture. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about that research. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Crystal Palace here in the UK, where today's guest, Lindsay Suddon, is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Lindsay. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thank you very much, Neil. So my name is Lindsay Suddon. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Proagrica, which is the Agriculture and Animal Health Division of RELX. So maybe I should tell you what RELX is. Probably not many people listening would know about RELX. It's a very large company, very large global provider of data-based analytics and decision tools for a variety of business customers in a number of industries. So they provide solutions for science and medicine and the legal profession, as well as helping financial organizations and others evaluate and predict risk and using data to prevent online fraud and money laundering, that sort of thing. So Proagrica it has really the same sort of data-driven DNA, if you like, but it's dedicated to agriculture, when I say agriculture, Neil, I mean agriculture and animal health, okay, because we also serve the animal health industries. And so really we help our customers use data to make better decisions and get better results and be more productive. And my role is really just to sort of help drive our business in the right direction, just making those choices about how and where we deploy and expand, our capabilities really to accelerate the impact that data and data-driven, workflow support solutions, can help drive the industry forward. And so that involves, because we, operate in many countries, it involves, picking the right parts of the agricultural supply chain, the right territories, and deploying what we have, but also it involves looking around and constantly casting our eye around to see if there are great businesses out there that we can acquire and bring into Proagrica so that we can extend the capabilities in terms of what we do. So that's what I do and where I'm from.
Fantastic. And one of the things that I love doing when I record this Daily Tech podcast is getting myself and people listening to think about areas that they don't automatically associate with technology as a rule. And Proagrica is a trusted partner for the global agriculture and animal health industries. Again, areas that you don't associate with technology. So can you tell me more about your integrated network, workflow solutions, actionable insights, and customers that are better connected to make more informed decisions, growing productivity and profitability, and the tech that makes all that possible? Because I don't think there'll be many people that are aware of what's going on here.
No, absolutely right. And look, I mean, agriculture, it's almost a mistake to call it one industry. I mean, it's a hugely fragmented, vast landscape of different parts of the industry. You've got input manufacturers who create seeds and crop protection chemicals and fertilizer. You've got distribution networks. You've got clearly farmers of crops and livestock, and then you've got a whole array of people downstream of those farmers, packing and processing and manufacturing and retailing and food outlets and all the rest of it. It's a vast landscape. So what we really do is try to make sense of some of those relationships that exist within that vast landscape, and we help our customers trade with each other in a better way, in a more intelligent way, so that they are more connected, and the decisions that they make are more grounded in data and insight. And we do that in North and South America, and the UK and Europe, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. I don't think I missed anything out there. So really, what is the value? I guess the value is about three things. I always say that there are three key things, that it doesn't matter who you are and where you are in the value chain. You're going to have issues about efficiency, because operations are very often, more manual and costly than they need to be. You're going to have issues around visibility. There's, insufficient business insight from the available data. Very often there's no shortage of data, but there is an inability to be able to access that data and use it intelligently and combine it with other data in order to create the right insights to drive businesses forward and to have better trading relationships and better outcomes. And then the third thing is engagement, really. Engagement, with trading partners and, with others across that value chain. It's really not where it needs to be. It's getting better, and we're helping making it better at Proagrica. But it's we're on that journey. So essentially we're helping a whole bunch of different people in that supply chain, with productivity, supply chain management, customer loyalty, quality assurance, those sorts of things. But I think your question was really about, well, how do we do it, right? And what is the technology behind it? Yeah. I mean, so again, there are three things I want to talk about on that front. What we've got at Proagrica that we offer our customers is networks and workflow solutions and analytics. Essentially, that there are many things that we do, but you can bucket them into those three buckets. So I mean, I guess the first is network, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So it's about being able to connect systems. So in two ways, really. So being able to sort of connect systems. So our customers have a huge amount of data sitting in the finance systems. A lot of data that they have about the customers. The warehouse operations, et cetera, and a lot of the time that data doesn't really manage to be connected within an organization, and they can't have those aha moments about being able to be more efficient and be more intelligent about how they do things. But then the other important way that we use the network is really to have our customers connect with their suppliers and their customers, so that trading relationship that exists day to day, week to week, can be much more fluid, can have the data flowing through systems. And the reason that Proagrica is an important part of that data conversation that happens on a trading basis is because very often the data silos that exist between trading partners, the data is in very different formats, and different systems, different formats. People call something one thing, the trading partner calls it another, etc. We're a translation device, essentially, and we're able to ingest data by plugging into the data systems of our customers, their suppliers, their customers, and really make sense of that and translate it so that there's a seamless flow of data, and everyone knows that, when I say yellow, he understands that I mean yellow. So that's the sort of supply chain value of our network, and really helping get that data moving for trading purposes. And the sort of technology behind that is proprietary. One of the things that we did was we bought a company 5 years ago that had developed this back in 1999, and they came up with this proprietary technology called Interlock. So it's really about simplifying data integrations. It's an integration framework, essentially, right? And it enables technical architects to connect different applications and communication standards and different data standards, and have that translated, and that comes into our platform, and then we're able to sort of spit that out, if you like, into the right format for the intended recipient. So that's that sort of supply chain network. So think of it in that sense. But there's another part to our network which came to us, Neil, with another great acquisition that we made 3 years ago now, almost, which was a business that was doing some great stuff with agronomic support tools, digital agronomic support. So, crop doctors, people who go out and give advice to farmers in the US. But what they had done was they had built a fantastic, over many years, they had built a fantastic geospatial platform that's called AgX, and it's tremendously granular, and it's able to collect data and put them into postcard-sized geospatial parcels of data, multi-layered, for instance. So we've got a fantastic platform from which we can then have data stored at various types of geospatial levels, so that people who are at that sharp end, whether it's the farmer or whether it's their agronomic advisor, or even whether it's the downstream customer, the food company, the customer of the farmer, etc., that data is situated in such a way and formatted in such a way and standardized in such a way that, again, just like the supply chain network I mentioned, that data can be easily transferred back and forth, given the right permissions and trusted relationships that occur. So that was a long-winded way of talking about the network. And there's two other things which I'll briefly touch on. The second bucket of what we do really is workflow solutions, right? So a lot of the data that we're able to bring in, we can make sense of by creating some great web and mobile interfaces that a whole range of users or different parts of the industry can use. And some of them are things like, we've got an omni-channel platform, essentially for a lot of people who sell to farmers to be able to have that digital engagement with farmers. We've got rebate management platforms. I mean, rebates are a big thing between animal health and crop manufacturers and distribution, and a whole bunch of other things as well: inventory management, product prices, suppliers. But the third thing that I'll mention, and then I'll be quiet and I'll let you come in, is analytics, and that's a very important part of our journey, because there's really no point in having the ability to ingest a huge amount and variety of data if you can't really feed it back in an intelligent way. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and money building up a great analytics capability. And that's taking data from that supply chain stuff that I was talking about, from the geospatial data platform that I mentioned as well. And really being able to apply, the great intelligence of our data science team and our integration capabilities to integrate data, to standardize it, clean it up, enrich it, analyze it, and really respond to some of the needs for insight that our customers are asking for. So in terms of our sort of technology behind it. We use probably some quite familiar big data processing, Apache Spark and Beam, and our primary push actually is towards building Lambda architectures to allow us to cope with streaming and batch workloads. So there's just a massive amount of data that we need to be able to handle because there's a huge amount of data being generated.
There's so much cool stuff that you're doing there, and I can't thank you enough for just setting the scene there on just how far-reaching it all is. And one of the things that put Proagrica onto my radar there and set off my tech spidey sensors was a recent survey that looked into the AI attitudes across 7 core sectors. So, like you said at the very beginning, it wasn't just about agriculture. We're talking government, healthcare, insurance, legal, science, medical, banking, and agriculture. Right. So, can you tell me more about that survey and who you spoke with?
Yeah, no, thank you. So just to be clear, as I mentioned, Proagrica is part of RELX, right? So we're one division of RELX. This was a RELX commissioned study that Ipsos Mori conducted, I believe. I think you're referring to the 2020 RELX Emerging Tech Study. So we were happy to be part of that, and they did look at agriculture there for us. So what it did was it canvassed, I think it was north of 1,000 CEOs and senior execs in the United States. So I'll caveat it that way, on really what their investment is in AI, what their attitude is, and the predictions really for their own industry in terms of where that sort of thing is going. I guess AI, Neil. I mean, you can ask for different definitions of AI. Look, my definition of my working definition of AI really is more in that sort of cognitive AI really. That sort of mathematical statistical analysis of being able to intelligently infer what a gap ought to be filled with, right? So I'm not one of those guys that thinks there's a singularity coming and consciousness will exist and all the rest of it. So really, in that definition, I think you're talking about a lot of sort of smart tech that can be justifiably classified as AI. But look, you asked about what that study told us. I guess what it told us is that all the industries that were looked at in that study were experiencing pretty rapid digital transformation, and actually COVID in some instances was providing an accelerant to that. And from my perspective, because I've always got my Proagrica hat on now, is that I think there was more than 3/4 of US agricultural businesses have said that they've upped their spend on AI related technologies, in light of the pandemic. And you can understand why. I mean, there's clearly some will to be able to work better and smarter, in remote locations. And the other thing I think that came out of that, which was noteworthy, is that, and again, this was corralled to US respondents, but those guys, who usually consider themselves at the forefront of many things, we're starting to realize that, hey, maybe other countries are, getting a little bit ahead of us here, and how can we catch up? And maybe at board level, we got to start putting, a bit more attention on AI and ag tech and, intelligent data solutions. So yeah, it was quite an interesting study. I think it was pretty much, a broad consensus. I think one of the things I took from it is that, that these emerging technologies, which we're sort of bundling up as AI for an easy definition, that they're just really helping the agriculture sector just to be more competitive and to be more nimble and more, and when a storm comes along like COVID, to be able to weather such a storm, in a way that you're not reliant on the old ways. You're able to infer when you don't know.
And I'm curious, there was a lot of insights there and a lot of things you possibly could have predicted beforehand, but was there anything in particular that surprised you in the findings in that report?
Yeah. Do you know what? No. No, look, I mean, you can be surprised by levels of percentage or something, but the direction of travel doesn't surprise me. And the reason I say that is that there's really a domino effect at play here, right? So what we find when we've been talking to people for some years now, some companies in this space, is that they're increasingly waking up to the fact, I guess, that they want to stay competitive, right? And they need to be plugged into data in a more meaningful way. Each one of these companies acts in a competitive environment, and when somebody comes out with some great digital based insight about what the local market opportunity is, and they get wind of that, then they're like, well, hang on, why aren't we doing that? And of course, we talked about COVID briefly, but I think the pandemic actually has really, it's done two things. It's caused some companies to tighten their belts and get into the bunkers and and say, oh, okay, now's not the time to foolishly spend. But a significant number of others, it's really made them think now is the time to double down on digital acceleration, really, and finding ways to replace some of the, some of those older, more, time intensive, maybe face-to-face interactions, and replace some of those with digital trading enhancements and digital insights and being able to do things remotely. I mean, I'll give you an example, is that since time began, right, you've had farmers growing crops and you've had, experts, we call them agronomists nowadays, coming to advise the farmer on what to do if the weather turns nasty, or which seed to use, or, what fertilizer to use at what volume, and, soil condition is this X, right? So there's a great, time-honored tradition of a trusted advisor and a farmer working together. Now, there's only so much you can do in the real physical world. If you're an advisor and you're having to go out and you're having to walk the wheat through all these acres with the farmers and spot the problems and analyze this and that, there's so much more that is being done at a faster pace now. And that is being adopted at a faster pace, with the advisors being able to take so much data that's coming off the farm, from weather data, from sensor data, from data that the farmer can provide them by using an iPhone app where they can snap what looks like a pest and it can go to their advisor. And of course, the immediacy of that advice can then come back. We're able to provide, for instance, smart alerts, right? Where you know that a weather event has happened, right? You have all the data in our systems about where that farmer is, what they've done, when they planted, what the soil type is, and all that kind of stuff. You can get really granular about saying, hang on, there is a red alert here. The agronomist advisor needs to know that they should contact that customer and say to that customer, yeah, you've had a lot of rainfall here. I think it's maybe time for a bit of protective activity in terms of, there's a danger of fungus here, because of the growth stage of your crops, et cetera, et cetera. This is new stuff, right? This, you wouldn't have been able to have that level of engagement in the old days, to have that sort of in-season remediation capability. And so there's a lot of value that can be created by using existing relationships and just supercharging them with data and with analytics.
And do you think agriculture is about to embark on a digital tech transformation, or really, are they already on it and been on it for some time?
Yes, that's an interesting question. You can take polar points of view on this one, and I mean, look, what I'd say is we're already seeing it, right? Yeah. And there are some who might have been reticent to, rapid digital transformation. It's and it's an issue that has held some parts of agriculture back, but many of those people have warmed, I think, considerably to digital in recent years, and that trend continues. Really, I think the next stage really is about not just those people understanding how digital works within what they've got within the data that they have access to and privy to. So it's great to be able to get at whether it's a farmer or whether it's, some other part of the supply chain, to say, okay, well, we've got this data, can you make sense of it? That's one thing. But actually, a lot of the real value comes from taking that and being able to collaborate with other parts of the supply chain, and with others, so that really the industry can work as a true sort of network of parties. Because essentially, I'm an optimist. Everyone in this industry really has shared interests, right? They want good, compliant production practice. They want the right things to be grown. There's common goals and standards, which sometimes, although maybe seen as amorphous, the sense of directions, people want to do the right thing. And I think it's down to organizations like Proagrica to really sort of help them do the right thing. And that's why I say that a digital network really comes into play, because if you're able to sort of say to, whether it's a farmer or whether it's a crop protection manufacturer or distributor or agronomic, whoever it is, food processor, look, there is data that is relevant to what it is that you need in order to ensure that your business is successful, and that that the people you're trading with have done the right thing. We can help, we can help facilitate that conversation and provide you with the assurance. And so that's something which is not going to go away now. That genie's out of the bottle, and it's just going to get better and more potent for the good of all, really.
And you mentioned in the survey results and the effects that the pandemic had on them, quite predictably. But how is the pandemic reshaping the industry, especially around tech and AI in the future, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think because it's such a vast and varied industry in terms of, the different actors in it and the different sort of pain points, I think there's been different levels of pain. I think that's fair to say. I mean, what we are seeing is an increasing awareness about the adoption of ag tech and certainly supply chain collaboration, how essential that is in terms of using data when you cannot use your eyes and ears and your boots on the ground and all the rest of it. And it's, I guess, this notion of shared responsibility, really, that's in sharp focus now. I think the pandemic has really focused minds in that sort of a direction. But clearly there's been, there's been labour market shocks from the pandemic, right? So you restrict the freedom of movement of people. You restrict the ability of, the sectors like fisheries and meat products and high value crops, etc. I mean, it has affected, and I guess the other thing that I was thinking about recently was just, these shipping containers sitting idly, in many ports, So look, there's definitely been, some short-term, God willing short-term, but, some short-term COVID-related disruption to patterns of behavior and, the traditional routes to market for farm produce, in terms of food outlets and restaurants and all the rest of it. They've had to try and find other routes to sell the produce. But what these things habitually do, is they provide a real catalyst for people to say, well, you know what, let's protect ourselves from future shocks. Let's, where possible, digitally enable ourselves to be more insulated from this, that, or the other that may not otherwise be the case. So, I think it has concentrated many minds in terms of looking at their own operations and going, if we had this digitization of that process, would we be better placed to deal with this in future? I think that's what's going on, and that's what we're hearing.
And of course, it's not just the pandemic. We've got the dreaded B word, the Brexit situation as well, affecting agriculture, which is another podcast on its own. But
it's another podcast. That's a moving feast, that one. Yeah.
But what do you think collectively it could all mean for the supply chain management from that seed to field to fork?
Yeah, I mean, look, my thing that I keep banging on about, Neil, is is that I think too often people think of the supply chain as a chain, right? Because the word chain's in it. and it goes from left to right, and there are iterative steps and there are adjacent parts to that chain. And, A talks to B and B talks to C, but A doesn't talk to C. I don't see it that way. When you digitize this landscape, you're really talking about creating not a supply chain, but a digital supply network. And I think that's quite important. And what I mean by that is that data needs to move up and down and across to various interested parties, with the right permissions, of course. So, all that's taken for granted in this conversation here. But those various interested parties in that food network, because, they're all trying to march to the same conclusion, to the right beat. And for instance, the requirements of some of those food manufacturers and food processors and food retailers, they've got standards, right? They want to know that what they're selling to consumers, right, meets with specific, compliance requirements about, what do you grow? What are the sustainable measures that are being put in place here? What's the regime of pesticide application that you've used on these crops? I want to see evidence that you haven't, applied this, that, or the other within X amount of weeks of harvest, etc. So, there's a huge amount of need right from the food consumer, you and me, back up the supply chain through retailers, through food manufacturers who want to position the products in the right way to consumers, and right up to the farmers. And because it's a network that we're building, a digital network, you're able, I think, and we can do this, and this is one of the things that we're putting in place, is you take some of those standards and those imperatives and those demands that are coming from downstream, and you're able to translate those back to the farmers and to their advisors, to the upstream people, and say, okay, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to produce, even beyond your governmental regulation standards. This is how you can position yourself with data and with the evidence of what you're doing in order to give the entire network what it is that they want. So seed to field to fork. I know field to fork is a much used phrase. I always say seed to field to fork, because you really need to take into account what's going on to the left-hand side of the farmer in the supply chain. The advisors, whether that's from, the agronomic advisors within ag retail, or whether it's some of the experts that come from the seed companies or the crop protection companies, etc. All these people need to be part of that digital conversation, because it's ultimately, apart from stuff that's being grown for clothing and fuel, it's ultimately going into our mouths. And so bringing it all together makes absolute sense in the long run.
And there really does seem to be an increasing focus on sustainability and technology in agriculture to help everyone do more with less. But what do you think we can expect in the near future for the industry? Is there anything else that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I think we can expect more pressure from consumers, right? I think that's clear to me anyway. More pressure from food consumers. Definitely more pressure from food companies, from governments, the EU. We've seen the recent EU stuff. There's movements going on in America, and that's, I think, in the near future only going to increase in terms of increasing the amount of data evidencing so that you can ensure better food safety, etc. But also, much more environmental responsibility in terms of how things are grown, and what the impact on the environment is. There's a greater level of visibility about how food is produced that is being demanded from all these quarters. And the good news is that we have the tools. And we have the digital infrastructure to be able to collect that data and to provide the relevant interested parties with the assurance, which helps with those trading conversations, and it reinforces the good behaviors that we seek to encourage in the people that are doing the right thing, you know.
Absolutely. And for anybody listening that would like to dive a little bit deeper into the report that we referenced, or just the great work that you're doing there at Proagrica, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so you can contact me at if you go to proagrica.com, which is proagrica.com, you navigate your way there, and you can find a way of reaching me. There's a link to reach me directly on LinkedIn, or you can go to lindsay.suddon@proagrica.com, you know, and I'd be more than happy to engage with anyone who's interested in more.
Well, I'll have the links to the show notes just so people can find you nice and easy. But I was thinking about the agriculture industry earlier today before we took this call. And although it's always had an industry that's had its fair set of challenges, I've never known one like this. I mean, you've got climate change, Brexit, global pandemic. It's almost obscene when you think about it. But the role that technology is playing and helping it to bounce back is incredible, really. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come on here and share the story and how technology is helping, because it's just invaluable. It really is. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Neil. It's been a pleasure.
So many great key findings in that report that we were talking about today. For example, 87% of agriculture respondents believe that AI technologies played a role in slowing the spread of COVID-19. 76% of agricultural respondents said they've increased investment in AI in the last year, against an average of 68% across other sectors, which is phenomenal. And finally, 87% of those respondents stated that their company offers training in AI technologies, up from 81% in 2019. So a huge thank you to Lindsay for sharing those research findings in more detail, and also for explaining what this means for the agriculture sector. And of course, for addressing how the pandemic is reshaping the industry, especially around technology and artificial intelligence in the future, and what that could mean for supply chain management too, from seed to field to fork. But if we do have anybody listening in the ag tech industry, I'd love to hear more about your experiences and any insights that you can share. And hey, there's even a seat for you here on the podcast if you'd like to come and share your story. So as always, email techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, all social channels at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. But right now, it's time for me to spin my wheel of misfortune and see what industry that it lands on, and determine which guest we're going to speak with tomorrow. Where it stops, nobody knows. But you will find out more tomorrow, so hopefully you'll join me again. So big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.